Hi guys, as you know, during your U.S. citizenship interview, the immigration officer will ask you personal questions when reviewing your application. This is one of the most important parts that you should prepare for your interview. In order to help you pass your interview easily, I will go over all the personal questions that the officer asks the applicant very often. You should learn all the questions in this video and practice to answer the questions as well as you can. I believe you will be successful in your interview if you practice these questions well. You will have 5 seconds to practice your own answers. So let's get started. Information about you. What is your full name? State your full name, please. What's your first name? Do you have a middle name? How do you spell your last name? What is your current legal name? What's your middle name? What's your last name? Could you spell your last name for me? What is the name that appears on your green card? Have you had other names? Have you used any other name since you became a permanent resident? Have you ever changed your name? What other names have you had? What other names have you used? Do you go by any other names? Would you like to change your name? Do you want to change your name? What is your social security number? When were you born? What is your country of birth? What is your date of birth? What is your country of nationality? What country are you from originally? Are you a citizen of any other country? Where are you from? Information about your eligibility. How long have you lived here? When did you become a permanent resident? How long have you been a permanent resident? What is your date of residency? Do you plan to live in the U.S. permanently? How many years have you had your green card? When did you get admitted to the U.S.? When did you get your green card? How did you get your green card? For how long have you resided in the U.S.? Information about your residence. What is your current address? Where do you currently live? Has your address changed since you sent your application? Do you have a different mailing address? What is your mailing address? What was your previous address? When did you leave that address? How long have you lived at your current address? When did you begin living at that address? Have you lived at any other addresses? Who do you live with? Where did you live before? Do you rent or own? Where have you resided during the last 5 years? Have you lived anywhere else in the last 5 years? What was your last address? Where else have you lived since you became a permanent resident? When did you move to that address? Information to contact you. What is your phone number? What is your email address? Do you have an email address? Information about your parents. Is either of your parents a U.S. citizen? Were your parents married before your 18th birthday? Was either of your parents naturalized in the U.S.? Is your mother or father a U.S. citizen? Time outside the U.S. Have you ever traveled outside the U.S. since you became a permanent resident? How many times did you go outside the U.S. in the last 5 years? How many total days did you spend outside the U.S. in the last 5 years? Have you traveled outside the U.S. in the last 5 years? Did you take any other trips outside the U.S.? Did you leave the country for more than 6 months? How many trips have you taken in the last 5 years? Which country did you visit? When did you leave the U.S.? Have you ever left the country? How many days were you outside the U.S.? Have you ever been outside the U.S. any other times? Have you taken any trips outside the U.S. in the last 5 years? How long were you gone? Why did you leave the country? Where did you go? Did you leave the country for less than 6 months? How long was your trip? What are the reasons for your absences? For how long were you away? When did you return? Have you ever left the country for a year or more? Information about your employment and school. Are you currently working? Do you work? Where do you work? How long have you worked there? What is your occupation? Who is your current employer? Do you have a job right now? Where did you work before? When did you leave that job? Have you worked anywhere else in the last 5 years? What jobs have you had in the past 5 years? What job do you have right now? When did you begin working there? Have you had any other jobs? Where are you employed? How long have you had that job? How long did you work there? What is your employer's address? What did you do? How do you support yourself? Where else have you worked in the last 5 years? Information about your marital status. Can you tell me if you are married, divorced, widowed, or single? How many times have you been married? Are you married? Is this your first marriage? Were you married before? When did you get married? Did you ever marry before? What is your marital status? What is your spouse's first name? What is your spouse's legal name? What country is your spouse from? What is your spouse's birth date? What is the current immigration status of your spouse? Where did you get married? What is your spouse's date of birth? What is your spouse's country of origin? Where does your spouse live? Does your spouse live with you? Is your spouse a permanent resident? How many times has your spouse been married? Is your spouse a U.S. citizen? When did your spouse become a U.S. citizen? What is your spouse's immigration status? Biographic information. How much do you weigh? How tall are you? What is your eye color? Are you Hispanic or Latino? What is your hair color? What's your height? What's your weight? What is your race? Information about your children. How many children do you have? What are your children's names? Where do your children live? Do you have any children? What are your children's dates of birth? Do your children live with you? Are your children biological to you? What is the immigration status of your children? What is your children's relationship to you? Do you and your spouse have any children? Do you have any children from previous marriages? Where were your children born? Do you have any stepchildren? Does your spouse have any previous children? Do you have any adopted children? Are your children U.S. citizens or permanent residents?